Good morning, everybody. I'm very, very proud to be asked to come here and talk to you. But before I start, I'd just like to ask a question. How many in this room, put your hands up, work in a HR professional function? Very good. How many in this room want to make a difference, want to create real value? Put your hands up. Fantastic. I'm in the right place. My name is Mark Gussetti, a mixture of Austrian, Swedish, English, Italian. So I feel that I am a true representative of the European community. I arrived 2 days ago and I had the opportunity to speak to 2 clients, which we have, to actually better understand what's going on in the Greek economy. Unfortunately, I can't turn on the TV, I can't read a newspaper without reading about the crisis. My role today is not to talk about crises. My role today, or my speech today, is not going to be about problems or challenges. I'm going to be talking about opportunities. And I'm going to be talking to what you can do as an individual, not just at an organizational level. I'm a true believer that organizations have strategies. Organizations are very good at creating a platform. But ultimately, what makes a difference is the individual. HR is the key to success for companies. Challenge which I've noticed throughout my 20 years working directly and indirectly with different organizations, particularly with the HR organizations, is that there is a misconception. There are certain ideals around HR. Many years ago, I was involved in a big project, and the project manager said, whatever you do, do not talk to HR. Reason being is because they complicated things. They made things more difficult. What I'm going to be focusing on over the next 25 minutes is to talk about how you, as individuals, can make a difference. How you, by your actions, can actually show that you are actually a trusted advisor. And I like the terminology trusted advisor because it's not something I can put onto my business card. Because trust is not about something which I interpret. It's what other people interpret. It's my actions, my interactions with other people, which will actually define whether I'm seen as a trusted advisor. Sorry, I've got to do my slides. Probably one of the most influential persons regarding the development of the HR role is Dave Ulrich. Dave Ulrich is a professor in the United States and has written a lot of white papers and documentations. And I'm going to be showing some of his slides. But I think this statement is very clear because it's not what HR does which defines it. It's what it delivers. It's the value. We have to create the value. Now in business, when we talk about value, it's very simple. It's financial value. It's the value for our customers. It's the value for our owners. Those are the true values. And one of the key aspects which I find is that HR and the business speak different languages. There is a misinterpretation because the value, when we talk about it from a HR perspective, is not necessarily what HR or the business wants to hear or understand. For me, this is the evolution. 20 years ago, working in HR, it was primarily the bottom part, the transactional, the HR functional, what we would call classic HR. What's happened over the last 20 years in terms of actually evolving the HR role, moving up in the business chain, we're now having to establish business knowledge. When I meet HR directors, HR professionals, one of the key questions I ask is, do you know your 5 biggest customers? Do you know where your key revenues are coming from? And unfortunately, more often than not, they don't. And this is critical because HR is not a supporting function purely and simply for the business. It is part of it. It is an integrated part. It's incorporated into the business. And in order to understand that, you need to know your business. You need to know your business because if you want to become a trusted advisor, you need to understand what are the KPIs, what are the drivers, what will make this company succeed. Business strategy. I think this is something which is now becoming more and more apparent, that HR needs to be part of it. One of the classic lines which I hear from every CEO which stands in these rooms to its employees is, "You are the most important asset we have in the company." You are the most important asset in the company. And most people will agree. I question it. I believe 100% that people are organizations. But it's not people, it's competences. It's competences which will drive the organization forward. And when we talk about competence development, we're not talking about the competence which we require here and now. It's part of the forward thinking, part of the strategy. This is where HR has a significant role. In fact, probably the most important role, because you understand the people. If you understand the people and you understand the strategy and you can understand where the company is trying to head, you understand which competences are required, then suddenly you are the trusted advisor. Now this looks simple, doesn't it? It's a lovely triangle in front of us. We start off here, then we move up and move up. So how do you move up? Well, I've said the first thing. Know the business. Understand the business. Now, people will ask, how do I do that? Well, obviously, you can take some financial courses, you can understand, but most importantly, ask questions. When people say something, ask why. Gain knowledge yourselves. In the beginning, it could be difficult because HR has never asked questions about the business, so why should you be asking now? But I think if you start understanding the importance of understanding the business, importance for the HR role, then you will also understand that these questions need to be asked. What you also need to understand is actually creating networks. I find now more and more that, and particularly in Europe, that HR is moving up the triangle, but they're also moving away from the people. They're becoming a subsection. They're becoming isolated. So they suddenly lose track of who actually they originally were there to help. That's the managers and the employees. So you need to be visible. The questions which I was talking about, asking why, you should be talking, creating this network constantly. Because for me, trust, it could be defined in many ways, but for me, trust is very simple. It's reliable. It's somebody who's reliable. I can rely on this person to help me. I can rely on this person to help me. So you need to understand the business, but you also need to understand the people. Talking to people, listening, understanding, that is the key. It is the fundamentals of interaction between people. It's the fundamentals of business. It's the fundamentals of communication. So do that. So if we look at what Ulrich says and defines it as 4 roles. So if we looked at the previous slide, On the bottom, we have the administrative experts. And again, I think in many ways, many people, money functions within an organization, sees HR as being an administrative expert and an employee champion. And that's, again, we're not saying, and I'm definitely not saying that this is not necessary. In fact, it's extremely necessary. But if we look at the top level, if we're looking at the strategic level, and we're looking at the future focus, then suddenly you have something which I think we all can relate to: change. Change is constant. Being a change agent is the sounding board, is the person who can actually relate to the people, but also can relate to the competences. Because it's competences which organizations need. It's competences and competence development which will make sure that people actually stay. In many of the companies which I work for, when people leave, critical resources which they want to keep, and the reason they're not staying is because they do not develop. They do not have the opportunities to develop. As a change agent, we know there will always be change. We embrace it, but we drive towards change. We are in control. It's a proactive, not a reactive attitude. And then we have the strategic partner. So the aim is to maintain the administrative experts, to be the employee champion, but also to focus on the reality of change, the reality of the business, and seize those opportunities. One of my other roles is Kirkpatrick. I don't know how many people are familiar with Kirkpatrick, but Kirkpatrick was a gentleman, Donald Kirkpatrick, in the 1960s, was looking at competence development. And I'm using the word competence development rather than training, because training for me is a method. Competence development ensues that you're actually going to achieve a competence development. They will actually be a result of value. So what Kirkpatrick did was create 4 levels. 4 very simple levels. And this is something which I think you can use no matter if you're working in learning and development or you're working with change. And everyone in this room is working with change. And what Kirkpatrick has actually defined was 5 principles. The end is the beginning. Start with the end in mind. What does that mean? What it means is, if we do not know where we're going, then how do we know we got there? What do I mean by that? Many times, if we talk about training, attending courses, we attend a course. We sign or fill in an evaluation form. And at the end of that, we have 6.0 of 6.0. And suddenly, everybody seems to be happy. We have the instructor who is extremely happy. Everybody loved the program. We have the participant happy. The program was brilliant. We have the HR. Brilliant. The business. Brilliant. But my question is, what is brilliant? 6.0, if that's the result, it's an extremely expensive result. Because there is no value in an evaluation after a training. We need to be driving towards a result which actually has an implication, a true value, not a 6.0, not a smiley sheet, but something which actually is tangible. So what we do, or what Kirkpatrick says, is when somebody says to you, we need to develop our employees, then we say, why? And then they say, well, we need to develop our sales force because we are changing, we're heading into a new market. And what the next question would be is, what do you want to see change? So we're already at the beginning defining, what do we want to see? What is the value? What are the behavioral changes we want to see from these individuals who've attended the training? That is what we should be asking the question. So we start with the end in mind. We always ask questions to really understand that, is this the right way? Because if we start with the end in mind, we might actually come to the conclusion that actually it's not training which will be the solution. There could be a number of different things. It could be process changes. So we need to start with asking the question, what do we want to achieve? And how will that look like? What is the result? What is the result if we do develop these salespeople to go into a new market? What is the result? And these questions are not necessarily easy to answer, and they shouldn't be. Because we should be investing our money in competence development. We should not be spending money on training if we don't understand where we're actually heading. Another concept, I talked very much about moving up the business ladder, business strategy. And in business, we talk about the concept of return of investment. Return on investment. I invest some money, and then after a projected year, I should receive 50%, 150% back. I get a return. Now, the challenge is when we're talking about competence development, it becomes very difficult, and I would say almost impossible, to actually start putting numbers, factual, fiscal numbers to a training event, because you cannot, because you will always be subjective. If the approach is, as I said previously, if you ask the question, what do you want to see? What is your expectation from the training? We want to see the following behaviors. That is an expectation. That is something which we could show. That is something which we can actually relate to, relating to the initiative which we actually started. But if we start talking about return on investment, we will have business people saying to us, that is not the case. You cannot say that that training made 10 million. And we will spend a lot of time trying to prove the point. So return on expectation is key. As I said before, business partnerships is necessary. Having that discussion, understanding the business, having the dialogue, creating the network. Then we have the opportunities, because we cannot expect to have all the answers. Sometimes I meet HR when I'm talking about this, and says, it sounds brilliant, but I do not have all the answers. And I said, exactly the point. You cannot have all the answers. Organizations are so complex now. Business is so complex. There is no one person who knows everything. We need to have those conversations. We need to actually find the people. Who are our stakeholders here? So we can really establish that we are actually doing something which will actually produce a result. Value must be created before it's demonstrated. We have to show value. Greece has a certain situation now, absolutely. But I work across the world. And across the world, it's a similar situation. If we believe that competence development is vital for the survival, the future of our organizations, then we have to ensure that we actually are creating value, that we actually are proving that this is an investment. I have a customer who, after many years, has actually realized that they are actually comparing competence development initiatives with other types of investments. It's suddenly now becoming on the same playing fields. It's actually being compared. That is success for me. That is success, because suddenly we are actually being taken seriously. We're actually seeing that value is being created. It's not just a smiley sheet. It's not just we believe or we think or it could be. It should do. It actually is creating a value. It is actually making people change. It is actually creating the competences which we need. And what we are trying to do here is create what Jim Kirkpatrick calls the chain of evidence. When we start this, we'll be questioned. When we start this, they will say, well, why are you talking about business? Why are you talking about value? Stick to what you know. But if we are courageous enough, if we have the network and we actually have the arguments, then we will actually be able to start getting that chain of evidence. We will be able to start at the end. We will be able to say, what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for this. Okay, we design, we develop, we work backwards, we create. We ensure that managers to the people going on the training actually are engaged. They take their accountability. And once you've created the chain of evidence, then, ladies and gentlemen, that is when you've created value. Because then you will actually be accredited for it and respected for it. This is not an easy journey. Far from it. And again, as I said in the beginning, this is not about what we talk about. It's not about pretty slides. It's about what you do. And initially what you need to do is talk. Find out. Create the picture. What are the needs? And use your HR expertise to create the right value. The Kirkpatrick model has been around for many years now. It's, again, well established. But the success and the failure of the implementation is down to individuals like yourselves. Champions. Jim Kirkpatrick would say, shining lights. If you believe that this is important, if you believe that this is not only important but critical, then, ladies and gentlemen, start talking. Find out who you should be talking to. And my favorite question is why? Because I find that sometimes when I ask people who are fully known or know the knowledge, and I ask the question why, they themselves have not asked that question. Nobody's asked them that question. They've just done it. This is the way we've always done it. But if we do the things which we always do and it's not successful, what's the likelihood that it will be successful? It won't be. We need to change. We need to think. We need to create value. I think this is the last slide. Well, these are the slides. I'm going to be sending these out for you. This is the last slide, and this is something which Jim, and I don't believe him, but he says this is apparently a picture taken in the Greek archipelago, so we believe him. What do we see in front of us? Well, we see two islands and a lot of water between. We see training, and I would use the word competence development, on one side. We have the business on the other side. So what's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture? I think the obvious picture is that we don't know that this could be, if it is Greece, then there's not too many sharks, I believe, but there could be strong currents here. There's a gap. There's a very clear gap. And this is the reality. This is the reality, because exactly, if I was to symbolize everything I've spoken about, this is it. And I could say HR here, is that there is this gap. This gap exists. And what we need to do, and what you need to do, is to create the bridge. You need to create the connection so it is one. I spoke to some of the attendees here today, and there was a mention of that HR it works for its internal clients. And I've heard the word also internal customers. And fair enough. But the challenge with that is that by using those terminologies, we're automatically assuming that we are separate. We're not part of the same organization. We have our internal clients. We have our internal customers. We need to be part of the organization. We need to embrace the organization, and we need to bridge the gap. Questions. There must be loads of questions. Everybody's going, yes, finally, stop talking. Is there a question there? Can I ask one thing, sorry, before I ask, does this make sense? Does this make sense? It does make sense. Is this a challenge? It's a great challenge, but is it also a great opportunity? Because if we succeed with this, if you succeed to do this, then you've created value. Sustainable value. Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions on the net? Well, we have a question. Oh, you mentioned there is a benchmark of revenues of enhanced behaviors. Very good question. Return on expectations. The thing is, and this is an interesting question, because if we take this as a question as it stands now, if we take the question based on the picture which I showed before, i.e. the two islands with a lot of water between, this is very difficult to answer. Because basically what we're being asked by the business is prove your points. Where is your return of expectations? If we build the gap, we bridge the gap, we create one island, then the fact is the return of expectations is also on the people who are asking on the expectations. Because together we've created what are our expectations. And the expectations, which I see, is performance related. So you can relate this to, if we're talking about developing competences, and that's what we talked about from the beginning, if we are driving to actually build competence for the future, then we should also be seeing performances. Because if we've chosen the right competences, if we've chosen the right way of actually bridging the gap, then we will see results. So at the end of the day, we can relate this to return on investment. We can do that. But if we start talking about return on investment from the beginning, the risk is that we can't prove it. Because suddenly it's almost like standing in front of a jury. Explain yourself. Tell me how you make your money. I can't do that. We talk about return on expectation where we're saying, well, you're asking the question, but you're also part of the solution. We need to talk together. We need to, together, I can't as HR establish what expectations we have, because it's we. Second question, Mark. You mentioned earlier that change is one of the fundamentals. What about innovation? Can it be adapted and based? Ironically, this is it. I work, and every single company I work with has innovation. They talk about innovation, innovation, innovation. And then I ask the question, well, what is innovation? Sometimes they hear it's everyday learning. It's the ability to actually, we do something, we reflect, how can we do it better? So it's incremental innovation. I would say that, and I'm stretching it, those of you who have not experienced the One Island, the ability to talk business with business people, the ability to actually create the return on expectations. Thank you so much. I talk too much. I do talk too much. I'm sorry. But when you've done that, that is innovative. You have created something which wasn't there before. It will then create more innovation, because suddenly you are not talking on two sides of a fence. You're talking together. You're creating. 1 + 1 is 3. So for me, the word innovation, again, it's a great word, and we can do a lot of things, but there's so so many studies showing that when companies invest huge amounts of money to create innovation, it actually does the opposite. It actually puts people in boxes. It defines what innovation is. Innovation is something which has always existed. It's called a part of the evolution. It's part of actually finding new solutions to existing or future problems. So the answer to that is, without a doubt, this is one of the drivers, in my opinion, to drive real innovation, not manufactured innovation. Mark, value has the same content or meaning for every level in organization. Is that just a question? Or is that a comment? It's true. I think this is a point, and I'm again, I don't want to preach, because I believe that most of you did not. I believe that this is something which you're aware of. But I think that the challenge is, and I can only go from my own experiences and also from studies, is that this still is a gap. We are still not talking value in a common language. We are still talking value from a people's perspective and not from a performance and financial perspective. The two are combined, as I said before, absolutely. But if we're going to bridge the gap and actually create a common terminology, then we also need to be talking in terms of the business and the fiscal terminology, not just the people. Why most companies are afraid of new leadership at the top of HR to make change happen? Because I think it's tradition. I think there's a tradition that HR has created itself, but also how the organization perceives HR. It's a support function. It's in the transactional, it's administrative. And I think that's the challenge, because they're not used to it. There are companies now which are realizing this. But again, this has not happened overnight. It's not suddenly now we are inviting HR. This is actually a process which starts by actually HR showing that they are the trusted advisor, that they are a competence and there's an expertise which is critical for the strategy. Because normally I feel that strategy is created and then it's handed over to HR, and you take this and this and this, and then you break it down and then you deliver. If HR is going to be part of this, HR needs to be part of defining that strategy. Because as we said before, even CEOs say the only assets we have is people. What you say next time is people and competences, the right competences. And HR can help you to do that. I like that question at the bottom. I would say in many ways, leadership and HR is the same thing. Leadership within HR. Leadership is critical. I think it's lovely to hear now. The word I'm hearing now in one of the companies is courageous leadership. Courageous leadership. So they're wonderful, wonderful words. For me, without a doubt, leadership, if you don't have strong leadership, if you don't have courageous leadership, it doesn't matter whether you are in whatever function you are. But within HR, without a doubt, you need to have strong. Because again, the HR function, you need to work as a team. And that requires strong leadership. And it requires actually courageous leadership, because you will also, those of you at a senior level who have the ability, who have the direct contact to the business, will need to take that lead. You will also make sure that you are not the only one. You are representing the HR, because the competences which we're talking about, they require and embrace the whole HR, not just one specific person. Are CEOs and top management usually supporting or even pushing to such HR if someone is? I'm seeing a trend, but again, it comes down to corporate maturity. Companies where there's a maturity, where companies have actually understood and realized that they have the need, they do it. Otherwise, again, there are companies which still see HR as the supporting function. They're the delivery. They deliver what we tell them to deliver. So I think that is something which is changing. It's not changing fast enough. And again, it won't change unless more people like yourselves actually take that first step. Start questioning. Start asking why. Start understanding. Start building your business case. And business cases which are built around the people's needs, but also the business needs. I think that's it. Any other questions? Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will be here during the day, so if you have more questions. What we'll also be doing is, from the Kirkpatrick partners, that you will be receiving additional information. There's a lot of good case studies. This is free material, so you will be given, it'll be sent to you, I believe, so we're saving a bit of paper as well, saving the environment, which I thought was an interesting point from the beginning. So that will be sent to you. It will give you an access to there. Please go in there, read. You will have my details. If there's any questions you want during the day, feel free to ask. I don't have all the answers, some of them, but I have some ideas. And if you want to talk to me, feel free to do that. Thank you so much.